የዛሬ እንግዳዬን ሀበን ግርማን ላስተዋውቃችሁ። ሀበን እናቷ ኤርትራን ትተው ከወጡ በኋላ በ1980ዎቹ መጀመሪያ ላይ ነበር በአሜሪካን ሀገር ካሊፎርኒያ ግዛት ውስጥ የተወለደችው። በዚሁ ሀገር የትምህርት ትምህርቷን ተከታትላለች። በአሜሪካ የዜጎችን መብት ጥቅሞችን የአካለ ጉዳተኞች መብት ተጠቃሚን ከመሆኗ ባሻገር ልክ እንደርሷ ሁሉ ማየትም መስማትም የተሳነው ታላቅ ወንድሟ በሚኖርበት ሀገር ኤርትራ ሊያገኝ ያልታደለውን የዘመናዊ ማየት የተሳነው ሰው ማንበቢያ ቴክኖሎጂ ዲጂታል ብሬል ተጠቃሚ ለመሆን ችላለች። ሀበን እንደምትለው የህግ ባለሙያ ለመሆን ያነሳሳትም እንደርሷ ላሉ የአካል ጉዳተኞች የመጻፍና ተደራሽ ዘመናዊ ቴክኖሎጂ ተጠቃሚነት እንዲያድግ ለሚደረገው ጥረት ድጋፍ ለመሆን ነው። በአሁኑ ሰዓት ሀበን መላው ዓለም ስለ አካል ጉዳተኝነት ያለውን አመለካከት የተስተካከለ እንዲሆን የበኩሏን ጥረት እያደረገች ነው። በሁሉም ዘርፍ ይበልጥም ተጠቃሚና ውጤታማ የሚያደርጋቸውን ቴክኖሎጂ ተጠቃሚነት ላይ ትኩረትም ታደርጋለች።
She speaks perfect English. I have no idea how she learned how to do that. With the capacity of the technology of both a friend and aide who's typing in what I'm saying that goes to her through a machine which translates it into Braille. So the next time you think life is tough, she got out of Harvard, and you know what she's doing? She is an advocate for opportunities for people with disabilities because, in fact, they have enormous ability, and all over the world, that ability is going untapped, diminishing their lives and the rest of ours as well. So let's give her a big hand. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up.
ሀበን ግርማ ለሰራቻቸው ስራዎች የተለያዩ ዕውቅናም አግኝታለች። ከነዚህም መካከል የሚጠቀሱት በዋይት ሃውስ የለውጥ አሸናፊ ወይም ቻምፒየንስ ኦፍ ቼንጅ፣ ፎርብስ 30 under 30፣ የእንግሊዝ የዜና አውታር ቢቢሲ ደግሞ አፍሪካዊ ጀግና ሴት ወይም women of African heroes ብሏታል። በትምህርቷ የመጀመሪያዋ ማየትም መስማትም የተሳናት የሃርቫርድ ዩኒቨርሲቲ የህግ ትምህርት ክፍል ምሩቅም ለመሆን በቅታለች። በተጨማሪም እኩል ተደራሽ መረጃ ለሁሉም የአካል ጉዳተኞች በሚል የመብት ጥያቄ ተሟጋችነቷም ትታወቃለች። ከዚህም ጋር ተያይዞ በጁላይ 20 2015 እንደ ፈረንጆች አቆጣጠር ከቀድሞ ከአሜሪካ ፕሬዝዳንት ባራክ ኦባማ ጋር የአካል ጉዳተኞችን የቴክኖሎጂ አጠቃቀም መብት ላይ ትኩረትን ይደረግ ዘንድ ተገኝታ መክራለች። በአካል ጉዳተኝነት መብት ተሟጋችነቷ ከፕሬዝዳንት ቢል ክሊንተንም ጋር ዕውቅናና ሌሎችንም ሽልማቶች አግኝታለች። ሀበን ሳልሳ ተብሎ የሚጠራውን ዳንስ፣ የውሃ ላይ ቀዘፋ ስፖርትና በመላው ሀገር መጓዝን መዝናኛዎቼ ናቸው ትላለች። እስቲ ከሷ ጋር ቆይታ እናድርግ። ሰላም ተመልካቾቻችን እንኳን ደህና ቆያችሁን። ዛሬ ፕሮግራማችን እንግዲህ መግቢያችን ላይ እንደተመለከታችሁት የቆይታችንን የምናረጋው በመጀመሪያ ክፍሉን አትሊስት ከሀበን ግርማ ጋር ነው። ሀበንን እዚህ ሀገርና ተወልዳ ያደገችው ያው እንግዲህ ቆይታችን በሙሉ የምናረጋው በእንግሊዝኛ ነው እና እንግዲህ ከይቅርታ ጋር እንድትከታተሉን በትህትና እንጋብዛችኋለን። የሀበን ታሪክ መግቢያችን ላይ እንደገለጽኩላችሁ በጣም እንደ ኢትዮጵያውያን እንደ ኤርትራም ቤተሰቦቿ ከኢትዮጵያም ከኤርትራም ናቸውና ሁላችንንም የሚያኮራ ታሪክ ነው ያላት እና ለሁላችንም ደግሞ መነቃቂያ ይሆነናል ብለን ስለምናምንበት ነው። እንግዲህ ቆይታዬን ከሀበን ጋር አደርጋለሁ። ተከታተሉን። Welcome, Haben.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for having me here on your show.
It's a pleasure and an honor to have you. I do have to explain to our viewers, the person sitting next to you is Tai Tamasi, and Tai is an interpreter for you. She uses an Apple keyboard to type my questions, and then you are able to read them on the Braille computer. And that's kind of how we're going to continue this entire interview. But I will have you explain how this works for our viewers. And I'm going to try to be very, very
cognizant that she's typing as fast as she can. So before we begin our interview, would you explain when did you start using this setup and how this works?
Absolutely. You did a pretty good job describing it. So we have a Braille display here, and on the bottom are dots. So the dots pop up, and I run my fingers over the dots to feel the letters. And Ty is typing what people say, and I'm reading on my digital Braille display. I'm deaf-blind. I don't hear very well, and I don't see very well. Deaf-blindness is a spectrum of different levels of vision and hearing loss. And this is technology that I use to communicate with people. So anyone can type on the keyboard, type their words, and they automatically appear in Braille.
That's wonderful. It's just an amazing technology. So let's go back to your story. I'm going to go back to the beginning. Your mother was in Eritrea when she first had your older brother. She fled during the war back then through Sudan, and you were born here in the U.S. Both your brother and you are deaf-blind. He didn't have an opportunity to go to school until he was 12 years old. I wonder, you know, life must have been very difficult for your mother. How did your mother handle that, you know, in a community where there are some cultural biases about disability?
So cultures start with stories, and my parents chose to believe a positive disability story. They believe that difference is an asset. And one story they repeat over and over again is a story they learned when they first realized that I am deaf-blind. And the story goes like this. Imagine you come home and you discover you've lost your keys to your house and you can't get in the front door because you no longer have the keys. Do you say, okay, that's it, I can't get in my house, I'm going to be homeless? Or do you find another solution? And what they teach me is to always look for solutions. Try the window, try the side door, look around for another key, call a locksmith. There's always an alternative way to get what you need. Though that's an example for a house, but that philosophy, that principle carries over into other aspects of life. We need to always look for alternative solutions. If one way doesn't work, try another way. Disability, we all have challenges, we all have differences, and it's up to all of us to choose to find ways to reach our dreams, to meet our goals, to fulfill our happiness. So that's what my family has taught me, and that's what I believe.
Your brother was 12 years old when you arrived here, when they arrived, your parents arrived here in the U.S. How was the adjustment? Not only was he deaf-blind, you were in a new country, a new system, and then you were born. Tell us how you adjusted. Tell us what life was like growing up in California.
Life was very interesting because around the world, and even around the United States, a lot of people with disabilities don't have opportunities, not because of the disability, but because of the lack of opportunities in communities. But within my community in the San Francisco Bay Area, we had teachers to teach me Braille. We had teachers to teach me cane travel and independence. So I had access to all my classes. I had access to all my books because I had a community that believed in access for everyone, including students with disabilities. A lot of communities don't have that. In Eritrea and Ethiopia, even in a lot of the United States. But it's up to all of us to choose. Do we want to be inclusive? Do we want to make sure everyone has opportunities? Let's make that happen.
Throughout your life, you had to fight low expectation from those around you, whether it's in school, whether it's your friends and the community. Tell us what that's like for a person with disability.
It's not fair for someone to assume you can't do this, you can't do that. So you have to believe in yourself, yes I can, and I'm going to find a community that believes in me. I went to college at Lewis and Clark College, and they provided me materials in Braille. I could access my materials. But a lot of other schools, they're not so good at giving Braille materials to blind students, and students have to fight and struggle to get access to books. My college cafeteria at first wouldn't provide me access to the menus. I said, I need access to the menus. I'm paying to eat here. I should have food choices just like everyone else. And they said, we're too busy. We don't have time for you. And I said, if you want your legal license to run a business here, you're going to make time for me. Because in the United States, the Americans with Disabilities Act, a law requires places of public accommodation like restaurants, schools, to ensure that people with disabilities have access to the services. So they're required by law to ensure that there's access.
Yeah, and you know, we're going to go back to that chocolate cake story because it was it was the impetus to your career. It just opened a lot of doors for you based on that experience. But before we get there, I kind of, you know, want you to paint a picture for us what it was like growing up in California. How did you communicate with the community? And as an immigrant, probably didn't have the network that it was needed. What was some of those difficult times like? And if you can just give us some examples of what life was like for you as a family growing up.
So I didn't have access to this technology growing up, and most people in my community didn't know sign language. I have a little bit of hearing, so I had to force myself to try to use my hearing to understand what people were saying. I missed a lot of information. And people would think, oh, she's stupid, she's boring, she's rude, she's ignoring me. And I missed opportunities. It was hard to make friends. It was hard to have fun in loud, noisy settings because everybody thought I was rude or wasn't smart. Later, I learned to advocate and say, I'm deafblind. This is what I need. This is what I use for communication. This technology I use is expensive. The government in the United States pays for it so that people with disabilities can get jobs, go to school, pay taxes, and be part of the community. But if one didn't have access to the money for the technology, they could use sign language. They could use print on palm, where they write letters on palms. There are many different ways to communicate. Money should never be the barrier.
To help us understand your disability, because you speak so well and I can understand you clearly, we may not understand how is someone that is deafblind able to speak the way you speak. Did you hear yourself when you talk? Can you tell us about that?
Speech is complicated. I have a little bit of hearing in the high frequencies, so I trained myself to speak in a higher voice. Low frequency, I have almost no low frequency hearing. So if you take a piano, the left side of the piano, I can't hear that part. I can hear a little bit near the top middle of the piano, but the very far right and most of the left side, I can't hear that. So I'm speaking in a very small range in which I can hear. And a lot of people, when they speak, they have a little bit in the high frequency, but also a lot in the low frequency. So I'm guessing and picking up a little bit here and there and trying to struggle to figure out what they're saying. It's much easier for me to use my sense of touch. My sense of touch is strong, no impairment. My hearing is impaired. So it's more comfortable for me to use touch rather than to strain to try to hear.
As our audience can see, we have two guide dogs here. Ty's dog is Lava and your dog is Maxine. Did you have to get a license for Maxine?
So I don't have a license for Maxine. A license is not required for a seeing eye dog.
Okay.
What I did is I went to a guide dog school where they're trained. She went to school for 2 years to get training. So she's highly trained and she guides around obstacles. If there's stairs, if there's a garbage can, she will move around them. She'll tell me there's stairs. If there's cars coming, she will stop so that we don't go into traffic. But I need to know where I'm going. I'm the one who says left, right, forward, stop. So we work as a team. I tell her where we're going, and she goes around obstacles. I know guide dogs don't exist in Ethiopia. I also use a cane, a white cane. If I don't have a dog, I would travel around with a white cane, and a white cane would tell me when there's something in my way.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, and you're going to tell us that story about the chocolate cake. We'll be back. ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ከአፍታ ቆይታችን ተመልሰናል። ቆይታችንን ከሀበን ጋር እየቀጠልን ነው። መግቢያችን ላይ እንደጠቀስኩላችሁ ይህንን ቆይታ ከሀበን ጋር የምናደርገው በእንግሊዝኛ ነው። ያው ሀበን እዚህ ሀገር ተወልዳ ነው ያደገችውና እስቲ ቆይታችንን እንቀጥል. So you learn how to be an advocate for yourself or learn how to be assertive for a need to meet your basic everyday necessities. A chocolate cake story in a college cafeteria. Would you share that story with our audience, please?
So I went to school at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, and there's a huge cafeteria. You enter, and there's a menu along the wall, and sighted students would walk in, look at the menu, and then go to their station of choice. Blind students couldn't read the menu. Now, it's not because we're blind, but because the menu was only in print. If they had the menu in Braille, or in digital format, then blind students could access it. So I told the cafeteria, this menu isn't accessible. I want to have choices just like everyone else. If there's chocolate cake, I want to know that there's chocolate cake. It's not fair to pay to eat at the cafeteria and not know there's chocolate cake and miss out on the chocolate cake. I explained this to them, and they said, sorry, we're very busy. We don't have time to work with you. And at first, I was frustrated and didn't do anything about it. Why should I complain? At least I'm in America. At least I'm getting an education. There are lots of people who don't have access to food. Who am I to have the right to choose what I want to eat? But after time, I realized if we want to change the world, we have to start with ourselves. We have to start with our own communities. So I decided to advocate for the change that I wanted to see in the world. I want the world to be inclusive, and that starts with my own community. So I went back to the cafeteria and explained, I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking you to comply with the law. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires public accommodations like this cafeteria to provide services in accessible formats to people with disabilities. And once I framed it as a legal issue, a disability rights issue, everything changed. They made it a priority. They started taking me seriously.
You threatened to sue them.
I did.
Were you serious about that, or this is just, you wanted to make sure they take you seriously?
I was serious. I didn't know how I would do it. I was 19. I didn't know how I would afford a lawyer, but I knew I would do the research. I would ask people. I would find mentors. I would find a way to advocate for myself and my community.
That's great. How could people and communities create a more inclusive environment for people with disabilities?
It's up to all of us. So first ask yourself, what are your skills? Are you an architect? Are you a teacher? And within your sphere of influence, make your own community inclusive. If you're an architect, build buildings that are wheelchair accessible. If you're a teacher, make sure you can find books in Braille for blind students. Make sure your schools are wheelchair accessible. Make sure you teach that everyone is welcome and everyone deserves access to an education.
That's great. And then, from Lewis and Clark University, you headed to Harvard. Tell us about that journey. How did you get to Harvard University?
I applied to different law schools in the United States, and I learned that if I want to be the best advocate possible, I need to get the best education possible. So I applied to the top schools. I had no idea if I would get in, but I had to try. And I got into Harvard, and I didn't know exactly how I would do everything at Harvard because I'd never been at Harvard Law School before. And I didn't have deaf-blind lawyers I could turn to and ask, how did you do this? How did you do that? So we figured it out. We tried one thing, we tried another thing. It's like the house story. If one way doesn't work, find an alternative solution. So we did that, and I was successful and graduated in 2013.
So Harvard was willing to work with your disability and, you know, figured out a way to make this work for you. They wanted you to be successful in there because you're the first deafblind Harvard graduate lawyer. So they must have done whatever is possible to accommodate what you needed to have.
They did. They did. They were, the people I worked with at the law school helped get all the accommodations I needed. I had interpreters, I had Braille, I had my materials in digital formats. I even had access to the ballroom dance classes. I took dance classes when I was at Harvard, and they made sure I had interpreters there so I could access that too. So I was able to work hard and play hard.
That's what I love about you, Haben, because you also love to salsa dance. How is that?
It's a lot of fun.
So how do you work, you know, if you're not hearing the music, is it touch? How does that work?
You're right, it's touch.
Okay.
So when I dance with people, I feel through their hands the music and the beat. So I'm able to follow and respond based on touch.
It's wonderful. Something else that amazed me about you is that you also like to surf.
Surfing is a lot of fun.
Wow.
So surfing is when you get on a surfboard, go out into the ocean, and then ride a wave back into the beach. And it's fun to balance on the surfboard and feel the power of the ocean, the sun, the wind. It's an amazing feeling.
How do you manage the direction of the wind and the wave to make sure that you're actually, you know, getting back and, you know, to shore safely? How does that work?
Like dancing, I do it in teams. So I surf with a team, and my water guide will help steer the surfboard so we go in the right direction.
That's very interesting. It's amazing to know that, you know, you're a pure example of what it means that all things are possible. And I'm just so happy that we're having this conversation. You're not particularly fond of the word inspiration or being called inspirational. Why is that?
I want people to think carefully before they use the word inspiration. Sometimes people say, you are an inspiration. But what they're really thinking is, thank goodness I don't have your problems. Your problems are so much worse than my problems. And now I'm grateful that my problems aren't so bad after all. So sometimes people say inspiration as a disguise for pity. And that's not healthy. We shouldn't judge or compare our situations. Everybody's equal. Everybody deserves access and dignity. So you can use the word inspiration if you know what you mean. If you actually mean, I want to go and change something. I want to take action. I'm inspired to make my school inclusive. I'm inspired to create facilities that are welcoming to everyone.
I wanted to ask, you know, while we're on that subject, sometimes people, you know, in their effort to be kind or in their effort to feel like they're being helpful, sometimes it may come off like, you know, we're doing a favor for you by accommodating you or by giving you access or making sure that you know, your needs are met or you have access to all services and everything else that, you know, a seeing person has access to. And sometimes it might feel like they're doing you a favor. And I know that that has got to be very difficult. Can you tell us about that?
I try to assume the best in people. Kindness is wonderful. I love it when people are kind. I'm kind to people too. So if it's genuinely kindness, great. But actions based on pity are not helpful. Pity is when one person thinks, I'm better than this other person. Poor this other person. Judgment like that is not fair and hurts our society. So kindness is good, helping each other, doing favors for each other, totally fine. And when you see someone with a disability and you think they might need help, ask them, can I assist you? Is there anything you need? Asking people is really, really helpful.
Sometimes people might see you and they don't know how to help or they don't know what to say. So I would imagine it's probably easier to just say, hey, how can I help? Am I right?
Exactly. If everyone could do that, our world would be so much better.
I agree with you. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back. We're back with Haben. Haben recently went to Ethiopia. What was the most memorable part of that visit?
My family used to go to Ethiopia and Eritrea every 3 years when I was growing up. So I've been to Addis many times. And the last time was in 2015. I went to Addis Ababa University and gave a presentation there on disability rights and inclusion. I went to Mekelle University and gave a presentation there on disability rights and inclusion. And I met with many disability groups there.
That's wonderful. Your parents are amazing. You know, they raised you to see the world with possibilities. So tell us about your father and tell us a little bit about your mother.
So my father's name is Girma, and he grew up in Addis and now is in the United States. And my mother, her name is Saba. She grew up in Asmara, and she met my father in the United States.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And it's hard to leave your home and start over in a new country. They've told me many stories about how hard it was to continue with their education, build a career, start a family. And those stories teach resilience. Always look for an alternative solution. Keep looking for solutions.
That's wonderful. So tell us about your brother, Muse. He's also very successful. Tell us about him.
So Muse is a technology expert. He uses technology like this, braille displays, and many different types of technology. And in California, he teaches people with disabilities how to use technology.
You know, before we conclude, I want to ask, I mean, we have a wide viewership in Ethiopia and Eritrea and around the world. If you could speak to a young girl or a young boy who has disability, various kinds of disability, what would you say to them to encourage them? And also I want to ask, what would you say to their parents and family members that are raising these children with disabilities? How would you like to encourage them?
Everybody's situation is different, but we all have the power to choose inclusion. It starts with ourselves. We have to actually believe that we deserve access to the school, we deserve access to jobs, we deserve civil rights. And once you have that basic belief down, then you can start advocating within your community. Don't let money be a barrier. Don't let political systems or governments be a barrier. You choose your own community. And the belief that's been really helpful for me is believing that we can always find alternative solutions. If one way doesn't work, try something else. If you can't see something, try using your other senses. Try learning Braille. Find another way to do it. You could always find another way.
That's wonderful. I have to ask, what was it like to meet President Barack Obama?
It was amazing.
I'm sure it was.
He was incredibly kind and respectful. So imagine, I'm using a technology system that's very different. A lot of people on the street would go, wow, that's weird, that's different. And President Obama was very respectful and gracefully switched from voicing to typing so that I could communicate and understand what he was saying. I love that. I like people who choose inclusion, who actually switch what they're doing to accommodate the people they want to connect with.
That is wonderful. It was such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time. We really appreciate it, and I know we're going to hear a lot more from you as an advocate for disability, not only here in the U.S., but also around the world. So thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Helen. Thanks for having me on your show.
My pleasure. So next time I see you, I'm going to make sure I type.
Fabulous, and maybe you'll learn salsa too.
How about that? That is on my to-do list for sure. For sure. Thank you, Haben.
You're welcome.
ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ከሀበን ጋር የነበረን ቆይታ በዚህ ላይ ያበቃል። ከረፍት ቆይታችን በኋላ ደግሞ እንመለሳለን። ከኛ ጋር ቆዩ። ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ከረፍት ቆይታችን ተመልሰናል። ከሀበን ግርማ ጋር ባደረግነው ቆይታ ግሩም ቆይታ እንደተደሰታችሁ እንደተነቃቃችሁበት አምናለሁኝ እና ይሄንን ሐሳብ እንግዲህ ደግሞ ለማጠቃለል ምክንያቱም የአካል ጉዳተኞችን በተመለከተ በሀገራችን ውስጥ መሰራት ያለባቸው ብዙ ስራዎች አሉ ብለን ስለምናምን ይሄንን ሐሳብ ለማጠቃለልና ለመቋጨት የጋበዝኩላችሁ እንግዳ አለ። በስካይፕ ነው የጋበዝኩላችሁ እንግዳ ዶክተር ሚሚ ጌታቸው ከሪችመንድ ቨርጂኒያ። ዶክተር ሚሚ ሪሃቢሊቴሽን ካውንስሊንግ ላይ ነው የምትሰራው። ብዙውን የስራ ልምዷንም ያካለለችው በአካል ጉዳተኞችን መብት በማስጠበቅ ዙሪያ ምን አይነት ህጎች አሉ እነዚህንስ እንዴት አድርገው ሊጠቀሙባቸው ይችላሉ በሚለው ብዙ አድቮኬሲ ላይ ትሰራለችና ዶክተር ሚሚ እንኳን ደህና መጣሽ። አንድ ስታቲስቲክስ ብጠቅስ ደስ ይለኛል። በ2011 በፈረንጆች አቆጣጠር ወርልድ ባንክ እና WHO አዘጋጅተው ያቀረቡት ሪፖርት ነበረ እና እዛ ሪፖርት ላይ ከ15 ሚሊዮን በላይ የሚሆኑ ኢትዮጵያውያን ህፃናን አዋቂዎች የአካል ጉዳተኞች ናቸው ተብሎ ይታመናል። ያ እንግዲህ 17% ነው ማለት ነው ከፖፑሌሽን ናምበሩ ማለት ነውና ከዛ ውስጥ ደግሞ 95%ዎቹ በድህነትና በአስቸጋሪ ኑሮ ላይ ነው ያሉት እና ይሄንን ሪፖርት ተመልክተሽ ቲሲስሽን ስትሰሪ ይሄንን ሪፖርት የተመለከትሽው ነገር ነውና ያ በ2011 ነው። በዚህ ላይ ያለሽን አመለካከት ከሱን ጀምርና ሐሳባችንን እንቀጥላለን።
maybe high percent ምክንያቱም World Health Organization ይሄድ ጊዜ ሰርቬይ ያደረገ አማርኛ የሚችል ሰው ከተማ የሚኖር ሰው ብቻ ነው ሰርቬይ ያደረጉት። ገጠር የሚኖር ሰው እኮ ሰርቬይ አልተደረጉም። ከዛ ደግሞ ከኢትዮጵያ 96 8 ምናምን ቋንቋ ያለነ ያን ቋንቋ ኢንተርፕሬት ማድረግ ሰው ከሌለ በወርልድ ሄልት ኦርጋናይዜሽን ሰርቬይ አደረጋቸው ማለት ነው። ስለዚህ ያ 17% በጣም ትንሽ ነበር
እና ከዚህ በላይ ነው ማለት ነው ቁጥሩ። ቅድም እንግዲህ ከሀበን ጋር ያደረግነው እንደው just ግሩም ቆይታ የሚያሳየው የአካል ጉዳተኛ የሆነ ሰው በደንብ ሲደገፍ በደንብ ሰፖርት ሲደረግ ትችያለሽ እየተባሉ ከልጅነታቸው ጀምሮ መብታቸው እየተጠበቀላቸው ሲያድጉ ምን አይነት ሰዎች የመሆን እድል እንዳላቸው የሀበን እናትና አባት በሰሩት ስራ ሀበንና ወንድሟን ያሳደጉት እንዴት እንደሆነ አይተን ተመልክተናልና ይሄ የብዙዎች እድል አይደለም። በአብዛኛው በማንኛውም አይነት የአካል ጉዳት ላይ ያለ ሰው ስንመለከት ብዙ ሀፍረት አለ፣ መሸማቀቅ አለ፣ ወደ ቤት መደበቅ አለ። ያለን አመለካከት መቀየር ያለበት ይመስለኛልና ምን ነገር መደረግ አለበት ያለሽ በዚህ ላይ?
መጀመሪያ የእናትና አባት ሪስፖንሲቢሊቲ ብቻ ፖሊሲ መሆን አለበት። ፖሊሲ ከሌለ አገር ቤት ሁሉ ሰው ራይት አለው ካለለ እነዚህ ልጆች እኮ መማር አይችሉም። እነዚህ ሰዎች ስራ መስራት አይችሉም። ስለዚህ ያንዱ ሰው ኤፈርት ብቻ አይደለም። ስለዚህ ላርጅ ፖሊሲ ማድረግ አለብን ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ። ስለዚህ ሁሉ ሰው ትምህርት ቤት እንዲማር፣ ሁሉ ሰው ስራ እንዲያገኝ መሆን አለበት። ስለዚህ የብዙ ሰው ኤፈርት ነው፣ የፐርሰናል ኤፈርት ብቻ አይደለም። ፖሊሲ ካለነ ኤፈርቱንና የስፔሲፊክ ፋሚሊ attitude affect ያደርጋል። so-called shame የሆነው ስቲግማ ያለነው ብዙ ሰው በዲስability ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ሰራተኛ ታይ ከተማ ውስጥ አታያቸውም። ለዛ እኮ ነው ኔጌቲቭ ስቴሪዮታይፕ እና ኔጌቲቭ ስቲግማ ኔጌቲቭ attitude ያለነ አይታዩም። still ሰው ያፍራል፣ ሼም አለ። ምክንያቱም ፖሊሲ የለንማ። ሁሉ ሰው መስራት ይችላል or ትምህርት ቤት መሄድ ይችላል ሚል ፖሊሲ ስለሌለ it's not going to
ግን አሁን ብዙ የተስተካከለም የወጡ ፖሊሲዎች አሉ ህጉ ወረቀት ላይ ቢኖርም ቢዝነስ ሰፖርት ማድረግ አለበት ትምርት ቤቶች ሰፖርት ማድረግ ብዙ ሀበን ስታወራ የነበረው አክሰስ ላይ ነውና ስለ early childhood ከልጅነት ጀምሮ በትምርት ቤት ከዛ ብንጀምር በሱ ደስ ይለኛል ምክንያቱም ህጉ እንኳን ተጽፎ በመንግስት ደረጃ ቢኖርም እንኳን ቢዝነስ ኮሚኒቲው ከህብረተሰቡ ባይን ከሌለ ጥቅም የለውም አይደል እንዴ ትምርት ቤት እንኳን ለመግባት አክሰስ ራምፕ ካልተደረገላቸው እነዚህ ልጆች ከዛ ቤዚክ መሰረታዊ ከሆኑ ነገሮች ብንጀምር ማለት ነውና እሱ ላይ ምን ታያል
እውነትሽን ነው የሚጀምረው መጀመር አለበት ችግሩ እኮ even የተማረ ሰው ኔጌቲቭ attitude አላቸው in 1969 ጥቁር አንበሳ ሆስፒታል ሪሰርች ነበር የሐኪም ተማሪዎች ለነሱ የተጠየቁት ጉተኛ ሆነ ሰው ስራ መስራት ይችላል ወይ ሊዳር ይችላል ወይ ጠይቋቸው አይሆንም ያሉ የተማረ ሰው እኮ ነው so just imagine የተማረ ሰው እንኳን ኔጌቲቭ attitude አለው ስለዚህ imagine regular people ያልተማረ ሰው እና እውነትሽን ነው በጣም መጀመር አለበት from a childhood on ህፃናቶች ግዴታ ያላቸው ቢማሩ part of society ከሆኑ people normalize it they can see it everywhere church ያያቸዋል in the community in the schools in the hospitals ግን አይታዩ ምክንያቱም opportunity ያለም ከህፃንነት ጀምሮ and you're right trained የተደረጉ አስተማሪ ያለን special education trained የተደረገ አስተማሪ በጣም ትንሽ ናቸው አዲስ አበባ ውስጥ when I was in አዲስ አበባ university አንድ ሁለት ብቻ ነው ታገኙ ሌላ ሰው even like ተማሪዎች ለምንድን ነው የምትፈልጊው ነው የሚሉሽ ለምንድን ነው ልጆች ማስተማር የምትፈልጊው ምክንያቱም they don't think they're teachable
ይማራሉ የሚል ሐሳብ የለም
ያሳበ እሱ እኮ ነው ችግሩ ግን Haben the wonderful thing about Haben የሷ example እኮ አሜሪካ ብቻ ነው መሆን ያለበት like ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ Haben if she grew up in Ethiopia she wouldn't be who she is now she's a lawyer I heard a lot of and she should be an example it doesn't matter the disability that if you are supported ይሆናል
so የሰውነቱ ጉዳት አይደለም የአካሉ ጉዳት አይደለም ምን አይነት ድጋፍ እንዳላቸው ነው ማለት ነውና ከትምርት ቤት ደረጃ እንደገና በመልስሽ ደስ ይለኛል ምክንያቱም የሀበን ኑሮ የተስተካከለው ከቤት ብቻ ሳይሆን ትምርት ቤት ጀምሮ ትምርት ቤት እንግዲህ አስተማሪ ብቻ አይደለም አድሚኒስትሬሽን ብቻ አይደለም ተማሪዎችም አሉ ወላጆችም አሉ እዛ ላይ መሰረታዊ ከሆኑ አንዳንድ ነገሮች ብንናገር ጥሩ ነው ወይም እንደዚህ አይነት ነገር ይደረጋል ወይም እንደዚህ ነገር ቢደረግ ጥሩ ነው ብትይ ምን አለ
የትምርት ቤት you're right several factors አላቸው parents advocate ማድረግ አለባቸው policy መሆን አለበት access መሆን አለበት and belief attitude is very strong Helen
አመለካከት ማለት ነው የአንድ ሰው አመለካከት
the world health organization young 2011 statement ያሉትን እኮ more than anything people with disabilities barriers አላቸው ስራ ቦታ ትምህርት ቤት ሐኪም the biggest barrier attitude ነው ያላቸው
ትልቁ እንግዲህ መሰናከላችን ሀገራችን ስለ አካል ጉዳተኞች ያለን አመለካከት በህዝብ ደረጃ በትልቁ መቀየር አለበት አይችሉም ሳይሆን ይችላሉ ወደሚለው መምጣት አለብን ሚለው ነገር ትልቁ ሐሳብ እሱን ነው ብዙ ስትናገርም የነበረው Haben
እውነታው ነው ምክንያቱም it's true እሱ እኮ ነው ችግሩ access እኮ እኛ ካልሰጠናቸው access የለም ማለት ነው እኮ መስጠት እኮ እንችላለን it's just we haven't እዚህ ሀገርም እኮ the same thing ነው አሜሪካ ውስጥ እኮ post 1991 ይሄ access ምታየው እንኳን አልነበረም access ሲለውጥ እኮ ነው ልጆች እንደ Haben ትምህርት ቤት ይሄድ graduate ያደርጉ ስራ ይሰጥ access is based on policy is driven by attitude
ብዙ አንድ የጠቀሰችው ነገር ነበር Haben ስትናገር ሌላው ትልቁ ጉዳት ደግሞ ሰው ከኛ የሚጠብቀው በጣም ትንሽ ነገር ነው low expectation ይሄ አይችሉም ከሚለው ጋር የተያያዘ ነውና ለኛ እኔና አንድ ልጅ አንድ ላይ ክፍል ውስጥ ከተቀመጥን እንግዲህ ኢማጂን እሷ እንደማንኛውም ተማሪ ሃርቫርድ እነሱ የሚፈተኑትን እየተፈተነች እነሱ የሚያደርጉትን እያደረገች ነው እቺ ልጅ ከህፃንነቷ ጀምሮ ያለፈችውና ብዙ ጊዜ ግን እሷ አይና አይና ታይም ወይም ደግሞ ጆራት አትሰማም ወይ ምናምን ብለው አንድ ቦታ አላስቀመጧትምና ብዙ ችግሩ ለነሱ ያለን ምን ጠብቅባቸው በጣም አነስተኛ ነገር ነውና ስለሱ ትንሽ ምን ትያለሽ
እውነትሽን ነው እኮ ሄለኔ the problem is that የኛ attitude so ጉተኛ ሰው ስናይ እናዝናለን ሁሉ ጊዜ like we feel sorry for them all we see is the attitude ከዛ በላይ ምንም አናይም abilities አናይም education አናይም potential አናይም we have no belief ለነሱ እኮ ምንም አናምንም ለዛ እኮ ነው because if you have no expectation the opportunity is small too opportunity ምን ሰጣቸው ትንሽ ስለምናምንላቸው እኮ ነው እና የነሱ access ትንሽ ስለሚሆነው ከኛ attitude based ነው እና ብዙ expectation ስለሌለነ ብዙ access አንሰጣቸውም
ልክ ነው ወደ ቤተሰብ ላምጣውሽ ወደ ቤተሰብ ልመልስሽ እንዳልኩት ከሀበን ህይወት እንደተመለከት ነው እናትና አባቷ ትልቅ ቦታ ትልቅ ሚና ተጫውተዋል በሷ ህይወት ላይ እናትና አባቶችን አሁን ባነጋግር ምን ማለት እችላለሁ ምን ብዬ በመክራቸው ደስ ይለኛል ታያለሽ እናትና አባቶችን ከስራሽ አንፃር ካየሽው አንፃር
ብዙ ጊዜ እንኳን እናትና አባት ጉተኛ ያለው ልጅ ካላቸው አይነግሩሽም እኮ ያፍራሉ ያካል ጉተኛ ያላቸው ቤት እናቶች especially ብዙ ጊዜ እንደ punishment ነገር ነው የሚታየው community ላይ it's like you have a fault ምን አረገች እኮ ነው እናት ስናያት አይ ምን አርጋ ነው ልጇ እንደዚህ ሆነው ምን አረገች like ልጅ እንደዚህ ሰጣት አርጎ ነው ሰው ማያት እና እንደሱ ስለሆነ ብዙ ጊዜ እነዚህ ልጆች አይወጡም እኮ ቤት ነው የሚያስቀምጣቸው ትምህርት ቤት አይማሩም ከሌላ ልጆች ጋር አይጫወቱም ከፋሚሊ ጋር ምግብ አይበሉም ምክንያቱም it's a lot of stigma it's a lot of shame አለ ብዙ ጊዜ በተለይ ገጠር አካባቢ እንትን agriculture ስለሆነ የኛ ብዙ ሰው የሚሰራው ገጠር አካባቢ manufacturing አይደል እና you need able body ካልሆንሽ አገር ቤት especially value የለሽ መስራታችን ገንዘብ የለሽ ስለዚህ you're almost looked at as a burden
እንደ ሸክም ይታያሉ
አዎ ምክንያቱም ከዛ ደግሞ personal responsibility like ምን አረገች እኮ ነው it's like she did something wrong ያ stigma ስላለ ብዙ ጊዜ እነዚህ ልጆች ሰው እኮ አያውቃቸውም ሌላ ፋሚሊ እንኳን አያውቅም shame ስላለ አዲስ አበባ እንኳን አንድ ሁለት ሴቶች when I met them ከገጠር ነው የሚመጡ ልጅ አላቸው እና 4-5 ወር ካወቀችኝ በኋላ ነገረችኝ ከዛም እኮ አፍራ ጸጥላ ላይ ትንሽ ልንገርሽ ምን ነው ስላት ልጅ እኮ አለኝ እና ወሬት ነው ስላት አገር ቤት ታዲያ ለምን አታመጪውም ከአንቺ ጋር ስላት አይ አይቻልም ለስማ አይወጣም ከቤት አለችኝ it's like this is what happens it's common እፍረት አለ እንኳን እኔ ምትሰራተኛው ሰዎች 12 አመት ነው ተሰራቸው ልጅ በሆነ አያውቁም የሷን ልጅ አያውቁትም ከዛ ምንድነው ችግሩ ስላት አይ ማለችኝ that's not a problem ግን እሷ ማየው ሰው አስተማሪ ወይ ሰራተኛ ወይ ተማሪ አይታጣቅማ so why would she think የሷ ልጅ ትምህርት ቤት መሄድ ወይ ስራ ማግኘት ለምን እንደሱ ይመስላታል አይመስላትም አታቅማ እንደሱ ነገር አይታጣቅም people disability የለም ከተማ ውስጥ አታቸው
ወይም ስናያቸው እንዳልሹ በስራ ላይ ሳይሆን ወይ በልመና ላይ ወይ በችግር ላይ በብዛት ምናየው እንደዛ አይነት እንጂ በብዙ ስራ ላይ እንደምናየው ብዙ ያደጉ ሀገሮች ውስጥ በየመስራ ቤቱ በየሁኔታዎች የተለያዩ ሁኔታዎች እንደምናየው ማየት ስለማንችል ነው የምትዩ
poverty ብቻ ካየሽ እሱ ብቻ ነው ያንቺ ኢሜጅ ያለሽ ሌላ opportunity or access እንኳን ሚሆን idea አይሰጥሽም
so ሁሌ በችግር ላይ የምታያቸው ከሆነ ነው የምትያለሽው ልክ ነሽ ቀጥይበት እሱ ሐሳብ ላይ ሁሌ በችግር ስለምናያቸው የሚለው ላይ ሞር ደስ ይለኛል ብትጨምሪበት
human aspect የለው example ሰጥሻለሁ ከተማ ስትሄጂ ሴቶች ሰራተኛ ናቸው ተማሪ ናቸው አስተማሪ ናቸው ፖሊስ ናቸው ታክሲ ድራይቨር ናቸው አይደል የተለያየ ስራ ነው ያላቸው ሴቶች ስለዚህ ሊሚት የለሽም ግን 1940 1930 ሊሚት ነበርሽ ሴቶች አታያቸው ስራ አልነበራቸው they didn't own hotels ከተማ ውስጥ the biggest restaurant ሴቶች ናቸው run ያደርጉ ግን in 1930s 1920s that wasn't the case እሱን አላየሽም አሁን ግን የ5 ዓመት የ6 ዓመት ልጅ ሴት ልጅ ምንድን ነው የምትፈልጊው when you grow up ስራ ስላት ዶክተር ሎየር ፖሊስ ትላለች ለምን ሴቶች አይታለች ግን parents but especially medical disability ያላቸው parents ጠይቂያቸው ይስብሻል it's like it's not reality የነሱ እኮ አይ በ5-6 ዓመት በሆነ እኮ you know guy you know it's a gift ነው የሚሉት የሚያድጉ እንኳን አይመስላቸውም እንኳን ስራ ቢሄድ ወይ ትምህርት ቢማር እንደዚህ አይነት ሀሳብ የላቸውም ሆፕ የላቸውም ምክንያቱም አያዩትም
ስለዚህ ትልቅ ሽፍት የአመለካከት ለውጥ በህብረተሰብ ደረጃ ያስተያየት ለውጥ በህብረተሰብ ደረጃ ከሁላችንም የሚመጣ ነገር ነው ማለት ነውና አንድ አጠቃላይ ሐሳብ ካለሽ ድልስጥሽና ሚሚ ፕሮግራሙን እናጠቃልለዋለን
ያከል ጉዳተኞች ችግሩ ከነሱ አይደለም ችግሩ ህግ አለነ ግን enforcement የለም ከዛ access and opportunity የለም ከዛ ደግሞ embedded cultural አምነት አለነ
የምናምንበት ነገር የምንመለከተው ከባህሉ ጋር ተያይዞ የሚመጡ ተጽኖች አሉ ነው የምትዩ
exactly that's what I was trying to say is that we have a deep embedded belief in our culture that only allows us to see able bodies as capable anything that veers away from that image we're incapable of seeing the potential because we've never seen it where we're from we see other cultures but not in Ethiopia
ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ የዛሬ ፕሮግራም ዋናው አላማው ዋናው ሐሳቡ ሁላችንም ይቻላል የሚለውን አመለካከት ካየን የአካል ጉዳት የደረሰባቸው ወገኖቻችንን ሰፖርት ማድረግ ብቻ ሳይሆን እንደ ሀበን ግርማ አይነት ኮከብ የሆኑ ዜጎችን ማፍራት እንችላለንና ይሄ የአንድ ሰው ቤተሰብ ጉዳይ ብቻ አይደለም የህብረተሰብ ጉዳይ ብቻ አይደለም የመንግስት ጉዳይ ብቻ አይደለም የሁላችንም ጉዳይ አንድ ላይ የምንሰራበት ነገር ነው ዶክተር ሚሚ እንዳለችው አመለካከታችን 100% መቀየር አለበት ማለት ነው እነዚህ ይችላሉ መንገድ እናስተካክልላቸው አክሰስ እንስጣቸው ማለት ነው እንግዲህ በፕሮግራማችን ከኛ ጋር ስለቆያችሁ በጣም አርጌ አመሰግናችኋለሁ በሚቀጥለው ሳምንት በሌላ ፕሮግራም እስከምንገናኝ ደህና ቆዩልን